Recording in
Let me start.
There we go. Now you got to watch what I say. Before I didn't have to. So we're going to start at the top of the hill in Mount Airy, which is a property that's near and dear to my heart. And as I'm talking about these properties, Angie is going to put a picture of them on the screen. This is Trolley Car Diner, which I operated for 19 years from 2000 to 2019. But a lot of people don't know the history behind how the diner happened. By the way, unfortunately, the diner doesn't look like this anymore. We sold it a couple years ago to another developer who has moved the diner to the side until we can put it somewhere else and restore it. And there's a large hole in the ground and it just doesn't look like this anymore, which has made a lot of our diner customers very sad. But going back, and I looked up the year and couldn't find it, but roughly 25 years ago, I got together with two local neighbors, Harris Steinberg, some of you may know, a well-known architect, and Arlene Bennett, who is a local resident. And the three of us organized a No More Leftovers protest. It was the day after Thanksgiving one year. And we were pissed off that Boston Market closed, I should say Roy Rogers closed the diner site. And instead of Boston Market, which took over from Roy Rogers, instead of reopening at Trolley Car Diner because they considered the site too unsafe, they moved up the hill to Chestnut Hill where McDonald's was located until recently. And, people obviously have a choice where to locate, and I respect that. But they left the site vacant, deteriorated, blighted, an attraction for drug users. If you walk the site at that time, you'd see a lot of drug paraphernalia there. So the three of us organized a No More Leftovers rally and got the attention of the owner, who was a Long Island corporation. Fast forward a couple years, me and Bob Elfont were looking around for a good site for a diner because we wanted to open one. And we negotiated, overpaid, and bought that site, which then resulted in a lawsuit against Marriott Corporation. I think it may be the only time I've ever sued anyone. But Marriott Corporation that owned Roy Rogers and Boston Market left the site in this condition, and that was not allowed by their lease. So we filed for a lawsuit. We were represented by Jay Goldstein, who later went on to start Valley Green Bank with me and Bob and a couple others. And we got enough money out of Marriott that it actually made the purchase price of the property more reasonable. We then found Palooka's Diner up in Wilkes-Barre, PA, and put it on a flatbed, brought it down. Actually, not totally correct. We brought it to Lancaster, where it sat in someone's backyard for 6 months, then brought it to what became known as the Trolley Car Diner site. 2 years later, we bought the 2134 trolley car from SEPTA, sent it out to Brookville, PA, which is right outside of Pittsburgh, had it restored, brought back to the site, made an ice cream shop out of it, and the rest is history. One funny note is the first property we bought was 7619-25 Germantown Avenue. That's what we bought from the Long Island Corporation. 2 years later, when we wanted to add parking and open an ice cream shop, we bought 7611-17. And that was owned by Virginia Mesa, who some of you may know, a local realtor who's now, I think, 92, 93 years old. And she and Bob Elfont were constantly at odds. And it was probably the most interesting settlement I've ever been to, because Virginia insisted I sit on her side of the table, even though I was the buyer and she was the seller. And you could have cut the air in that room with a steak knife. It was so thick. So I'll never forget that settlement, 25 years later. Okay, anyway, moving on to 7402. By the way, feel free to type in questions if you have any along the way. Happy to cover any subjects related or unrelated to this, and Angie will interrupt and ask me questions. 7402 Germantown Avenue, which I think was the first property I purchased in Mount Airy. This was the future site or the former site of Cresham Cottage Cafe, which I operated for 9 years. That was my first restaurant. And I briefly in the early 90s, I had a realtor's license with McCarthy Realty. And this property had always been a house. So I had my realtor's license, and I had a friend who lives in Narberth. Our friends Bob and Nicole wanted to open up a coffee shop. So this house went on the market. I tried to get them interested in it, and they were not interested, and I ended up selling it to myself. So that was how Cresham Cottage Cafe happened. It was an estate sale. Mr. and Mrs. Ernst had lived there. Mr. Ernst, who was a carpenter, passed away. Mrs. Ernst, when she passed away, she left it to the executor of her estate. And the executor of her estate was really enamored with our plans, myself and Lisa Salome, who was my business partner on the restaurant. And the executor of the estate, because she really wanted to see us get it, actually accepted an offer that was $30,000 less than an offer from Richard Snowden, who some of you may know, who's a well-known developer in Chestnut Hill. So I'm always very thankful to the executor of the estate for getting me started in the restaurant business. And like I said, we then operated for 9 years. It's still a restaurant. It's known as Jansen's. We went through a very contentious zoning battle in order to get a variance to make it a restaurant. So I'm really proud that so many years later, I think we opened first in 1996. So many years later, it's still operating as a restaurant, and really good food, by the way, Jansen's, if you ever get a chance. So moving along.
So Ken, I have a question about this one real quick. So you
go ahead.
You bought it without knowing if you were going to be able to do the plan that you had put in place because the zoning?
Yeah, a little crazy, huh?
All right.
I just had a confidence that we could get it done.
Awesome.
And a further story on that is, at the time I was chief of staff to City Councilwoman Happy Fernandez. And I ended up fighting 2 other council members who were not pleased with Happy at the time. And so I ended up sort of taking on her opposition in addition to the normal opposition. But we were able to win over the objections of the district council person and another at-large council member. But yeah, we took a lot of risk. One other funny story that I like to tell about that zoning battle, it really was contentious. It was my first zoning fight as a real estate developer. And, the first meeting I went to, I got pretty beat up, got yelled at by neighbors. We'll never be able to park in our neighborhood. There'll be rats running around the neighborhood. We heard just about everything. And the second meeting, I had he was probably 1 year old at that point, my oldest son, Ari. And so I was like, and Judy said, my wife said, I can't babysit tonight. I said, well, I'm sorry, I got this meeting. So I brought Ari with me to the meeting, and I held him and I patted him the whole time. It was the best behaved neighborhood meeting I've ever been to. So if you ever get a chance and you're going to a contentious zoning board meeting, maybe bring a newborn with you, and it might just help. So I'll never forget that, the different tone at that meeting versus the first meeting.
I can imagine.
Yeah. So moving along to 7152 Germantown. Let me see. You have a picture of there?
Yeah.
It's on the right. Yeah, there we go. It's on the right there. It's now a restaurant. This was a building that was on again, off again, vacant. There was offices in there. It was underutilized and needed major renovation. So my business partner and I, Bob Kaufman, bought the building and had a whole bunch of restaurant tenants in there over time. We decided, Mount Airy needed more good food. And so we were intent on putting a hood and ventilation system and also walk-in fridge in this property. So over the years, it was first Bitars, which was Middle Eastern food, which I believe still exists in South Philly. They were there for a couple years. We had Wine Thief that was there for 5 years. Crescent Valley Grain Exchange was there for at least 5 years, and hasn't been announced yet, but the next tenant, this Grain Exchange left earlier this year, is going to be a second restaurant opened by our tenant, Mount Airy Tap Room. Rob is an experienced restaurateur, has many years of management and ownership of restaurants under his belt. So we're looking forward to what concept he brings to this building. It should be really nice. A lot of parking in the back. On the second floor, we have a wellness center that's been there for many years. So it's always nice when you have one tenant who stays and sort of anchors the building. Moving along to 7036-38 Germantown Avenue. This is a building with a lot of interesting history. Do we have a picture of this yet? Yep, there we go. No, it doesn't look right. 7036-38. You're a couple blocks off.
7036.
I'm sorry, my bad. 7136-38.
7136. There we go.
Yeah. All these numbers in my head, It's interesting in our office because we don't even say what streets properties are on. We just refer to properties as the number address. But 7136-38 is the former Anglesey Pub. Anglesey Pub is a bar, sort of a dive bar. That's sort of being nice about it. That started in Wildwood, New Jersey, down at the shore, and then opened up a second location in downtown Mount Airy. And in Mount Airy, those of you who go way back, I was actually on a zoning Zoom call with Councilwoman Cindy Bass recently, and she remembered and discussed the drug triangle, which absolutely existed there. It was the Anglesey Pub, it was the takeout Chinese place across the street, and it was the laundromat across Germantown Avenue. And people along the avenue who were in the know referred to that as the drug triangle. And it was real. It wasn't necessarily the owners of the businesses that were in the drug trade, but it was people who, the businesses knew what was going on and allowed the drug dealers to operate in front of those three properties. So we knew in order to change Mount Airy, we had to change those three properties. Two of them I purchased, this one and the next one I'll talk about. And then across the street, David Fellner purchased the laundromat and closed it down and found another operator who was not willing to tolerate the drugs being traded. So Anglesey Pub was there. We bought it knowing we wanted them out. A lot of LCB violations against them, serving to minors under 21, serving past 2 a.m. in the morning. So it was a matter of time. It was very much a dive bar. I remember the owners of Anglesey used to sit at the end of the bar and just put money in the video game machine and play over and over again because they had nothing to do. There was, at least early in the evening, there was very little traffic. So it took us about 2.5 years to finally move them out. And then we got a call from Peggy and Tom, who eventually opened up Earth Bread and Brewery, who until recently, 13 years later, operated there. And I always remember first meeting Peggy and Tom across the street at a coffee shop, Infusion Coffee, which was there for years. It was the first independent coffee shop in Northwest Philly. And Peggy and Tom had almost signed a lease in New York City. It fell through at the last moment, but they had been brewing beer from a brewery outside of Atlantic City for many years, but had never opened a restaurant. So they had this concept, this pizza type concept that they wanted to bring to Mount Airy. And, they're telling me their concept and they clearly don't know Mount Airy or Northwest Philly. Like I said, they had been living near Atlantic City for years. And I remember at the end of the meeting, I just said, you have no idea how Mount Airy you are. And because they wanted to use recycled materials in their bathrooms. And, instead of the normal dividers between stalls in a bathroom, they used recycled doors, that sort of thing. So I knew they were going to do well at that location. And for 13 years, they did very well. So moving across the street to 7134 Germantown Avenue, another piece of the drug triangle, it was a takeout Chinese restaurant. And again, like a lot of these properties, we had to overpay in order to gain control of the property. It was a very disgusting restaurant location. It was actually difficult to move in there, to walk in there. I'll never forget, after they left, my head of construction, Jaime Rodriguez, walked through. And he not only said it was the most disgusting vacant building he's ever seen, he physically got sick and had to leave the building based on what he saw. It was that bad. And it still took us 2 years to get the health department to shut them down. And we finally, it wasn't actually the health department that eventually shut them down. We signed a new lease with them, and they were not allowed to sell drug paraphernalia or do other not so good things for the community there. And they broke all those rules, and we were eventually able to negotiate them being out. So it is now a Montessori school. We did a re-renovation to the outside. They renovated the inside. And I went to their grand opening a few months ago, and really nice facility that they've created there. 7125 27 Germantown Avenue, which is across the street, somewhat across the street. This was one of the first properties that we purchased in Mount Airy. It's a historically designated property. And we purchased it from lawyers who had their business there. It's now a wellness center, a business called the Juice Room, has 2 of the 3 storefronts. And we renovated the 5 apartments upstairs into 4 very attractive apartments. And we've had this for a bunch of years since. Really nice property. Next property right behind it is 23 East Durham, which we purchased from Stan Smith, who probably a lot of you know. Stan is one of our mentors in the Jumpstart program and a former business partner of mine. We purchased it for, I forget the exact number, but a couple $100,000, which seemed like a lot at the time. We sold it for almost 3 times that to a local developer who tore it down and built condos there. I got to say, I didn't see that coming. There was no new construction or very little new construction going on in Mount Airy at the time, but he obviously had a vision for the property. And so he demoed and put condos there, which I think are still for sale. Moving down the street, Angie, any questions? Anything come up?
No, not yet.
Okay, moving down the street, 7111 Germantown Avenue. This is Mount Airy Presbyterian Church. There we go. And this is in the middle of construction that I'll talk about in just a sec. This was interesting because similar to Second Baptist Church that I mentioned earlier, the leadership of Mount Airy Presbyterian Church called me and said, you know, we're at the end of our rope. We are running out of money. We would like to stay alive, but don't know how to do it. And I walked through, I had several meetings with them. I looked at previous plans that the Community Design Collaborative did on the church. And we came to agreement. I presented a plan and they agreed to it to give them a low-cost, long-term lease on the sanctuary so that they could continue to worship there. And then we would buy both the sanctuary and the rest of the church, which was like classrooms and daycare center from them. And we made that L-shaped structure into 19 condos. We have sold 12 up to date. We spent about $7 million constructing the condos. And then the church continued to worship there for about 8 years, eventually got smaller and smaller, ran out of money, and recently merged with another church. So we just signed a long-term lease with Theater Horizon that's opening up a second theater. Not Theater Horizon. Oh my God, that's in Norristown. Theater out of Center City, excuse me. That is opening up a second theater there, which should happen hopefully later this year, which is very exciting for Mount Airy because we have Quintessence Theater already located in Mount Airy. So we'll have a little mini theater row there, which I think will be great for area restaurants and will help bring a lot of business to Mount Airy. 7060, we're now crossing Mount Pleasant. 7060 was a property that we acquired from 3 end users who were located there, a dentist, a pharmacy, and a pediatrician. Pediatrician, by the way, was Mount Airy Pediatrics, who helped raise my 3 kids and has since left that location, and we renovated St. Michael's Church for them, and they have a wonderful facility now. So yeah, it was a very interesting negotiation from what I remember because the 3 partners did not get along. So we needed to figure out a way to purchase this and get all 3 sellers of the property to not only agree, but to show up at the settlement table. And that was not easy, and it took quite a while. We renovated this property into 11 office suites and Cherish Restaurant, which has been there for the last couple of years. Across the street from that is 7045 Germantown Avenue. It's a funeral home. And we were legitimately concerned when we walked through, or when we first bought this property, wondering if they had left any caskets or bodies around, but we did not find any evidence of the funeral home, fortunately. But it was an acquisition from Northwest Interfaith Movement, which, I'm sorry, Northwest Interfaith Movement was our first tenant, who located there, and we built 11 office suites, which are 100% leased out. So that's an interesting property to do adaptive reuse on a funeral home into office suites, which has really been one of our unique approaches to these historic buildings. 6841 Germantown Avenue. Not much interesting about 6841. We renovated it. It was a blighted property that we made into a State Farm insurance office. But we also bought 6841 Rear, which is 10 garages in the back. And what I remember about the acquisition of that property, it was owned by my former partner, Bob Elfont. And Bob and I and two other friends went up to New Hampshire for a long weekend and stayed at a B&B and had a good time. On the way home, Bob and I spent probably about 3 hours in the car negotiating this deal, which was, like I said, 10 garages, $100,000 property, and much to the chagrin of the other two people in the car who were totally bored and still talk about it. So that's what I always remember about the acquisition of that property. 6825 Germantown Avenue is not a property that I've ever owned.
Before we move on, there's actually a couple questions on the funeral home that came in.
Yeah.
How long did that rezoning process take, and how was that?
Rezoning process, that's a good question. Yeah, you're right. It was zoned incorrectly. And I think the zoning took about 6 months.
Okay.
It was not a difficult zoning from what I remember, because there's 16 parking spaces in the rear. So we had sufficient parking. And, you know, it's office space on Germantown Avenue, which it's hard to object to that. So that was a pretty easy zoning. And yeah, my memory is about 6 months was the period of time. Other question?
Was just asking if you remember the name of the funeral home that was there.
Oh yeah, oh my God. No, I don't. No, I don't. I remember the funeral home was there for many, many years. I think they may have aged out and closed the business. So I don't think they moved elsewhere. Sorry, I can't remember. But no. We'll have to research that, Angie.
Yeah, yeah. All right. So
I bet if you Google it, you will find it also.
It's true.
Address is 7045 Germantown Avenue. Just put former funeral home in there, and I bet it'll pop up. And then you can tell the rest of us.
Will do.
6825, like I said, was a building that I never owned, but my offices were on the second floor for 7 years. It was owned by McCoubry Overholser contractors, who are not only friends of mine, but John McCoubry was also a partner in Valley Green Bank with me. And Charlie is one of my partners in my Sixers group. We split season tickets to the Sixers, and they owned the building, and they were also the general contractors on my largest project to date, which was the Waldorf School. So the very high-end contractors. And I bring up this property because there were architects in there before we were in there, and there's architects in there now in the space. And everyone assumed I owned the building, because why would I rent a property? Well, it was perfect space for Philly office retail. So we went ahead and rented, because there's nothing wrong with renting. But people were really surprised when we left and did not own the building. 6784 across the street is Fino's Pizza, and yet another property that we overpaid for, or at least at the time overpaid for. And because I wanted the corner for a pocket park, I was co-founder and I stole chair after 15 years, the Mannery Business Improvement District. And we built 6 pocket parks along Germantown Avenue. And I thought that corner at Carpenter and Germantown would make a perfect pocket park. So I purposely bought a building that did not need renovation. Usually that what we're buying is blighted and vacant and deteriorated, not in this case. So Finos, we signed a long-term lease with Finos, which allowed them to reinvest in their space, which was really good because they were on a year-to-year lease previously. 6732-36 Germantown Avenue is where Melilani Cafe is, and Nina Street's Design is next door. What I remember about this property is 3 storefronts. Melilani has 2 out of the 3 that we connected for them. And it was so structurally unsound that the back left side of the property was a full 9 inches lower than the other side of the property. And for those of you who know structural issues, that's a pretty significant difference. So we had to structurally change that and put a lot of support beams into the basement. And continue. So there's 2 apartments upstairs, like I said, 3 storefronts on the first floor.
And another pocket park here too.
And another, thank you, and another pocket park on that corner. Corners are great properties, by the way, if you do commercial real estate. If there were not pocket parks there, we could build on those sites, but I'm glad that we have some nice green space along Germantown Avenue. It's actually not on my list here, but 6730 Germantown Avenue is a building that we recently purchased, and Farmer John is our tenant there. Farmer John, Krista Renee, has gotten a lot of publicity over the last couple of years. Social media really likes her. The press really likes her because she is a Black woman and a farmer, and is making it her mission to show others how to farm and show other people how to eat in a healthy way. And I'm actually a member for CSA and picked up my food today, but very cool if you want to get over there. It was this is a sort of a classic story, things come around after many years, but there was a plumber there who actually was the master plumber on the trolley car diner renovation, and many years ago. And I said to him at one point, hey, if you ever sell your building at 6730, I'd be interested. Well, it was always in the back of his mind. And 10 years later, he called me and said, I'm ready to sell. Give me your number. I gave him a number. He accepted, and we renovated it for Farmer John. So never give up on a property because everything comes around.
And let folks know when you're interested so they remember to call you.
That's right. I probably should have followed up with them.
Her tea, the Viva Leaf is her tea brand, and it's wonderful tea at the Farmer John. So great tea.
Exactly. Yep. I know she takes a lot of pride in her teas. So moving down the avenue, 18-46 East Johnson Street. This was an interesting property. It was about an 1.5-acre lot with 2 historic buildings and 1 non-historic building on the lot. So I specifically wanted to buy it to subdivide it, reposition it, make sure make sure all 3 properties were renovated and maintained. And we bought it from a wholesaler who obviously wanted his piece of the pie. But when we went to look at it, we met with the seller of the property, or I should say the current owner of the property. Well, the wholesaler wanted $400,000. We were able to get out of the seller that he was selling it to the wholesaler for $300,000. And once he told us that, then we knew that we could get it less expensively from the wholesaler. So I think we eventually bought it for $340,000 instead of the $400,000 that the wholesaler wanted. We then subdivided the 2 historic properties. The 3rd property, sold that off, and then subdivided 2 front lots for future development and a rear lot, which a developer up the street is proposing a surface parking. And the reason we didn't develop it, and the reason why this developer was looking at surface parking, is because not only, and I haven't seen this anywhere else, I'm sure it exists in the city, but I haven't seen it. Not only were the 2 properties on the right-hand side, let me see what picture you have up. This is one of them here. But yeah, and then, no, not that one. Yeah, there we go, the little one, thank you. That's 18, the little one. And then the other one, which I call the White House, is 20 East Johnson. Not only were those 2 historically designated so that you could not demo them and instead had to renovate them, but all the ground behind them and on the side of them was designated. Well, the only reason why ground would be designated is if they believe something was underground. Well, in this case, for those of you who know the area, Cliveden House is across the street where the Battle of Germantown was fought. And they are very confident that British soldiers who died on the battlefield were buried where they died, because the Americans weren't going to give them a proper burial in a graveyard. They buried them right there. So very likely that dozens and who knows, maybe hundreds of British soldiers are buried on this lot. So if you ever wanted to construct and dig there, you would have to uncover all those bodies, 250 years later, which needless to say would be cost prohibitive. So you can do a surface parking lot over them without digging down. So that's why that was the proposal for this site.
And subdividing, how, was that a onerous process or pretty simple to subdivide something like this?
Yeah, we've done a few of these now. We did St. Michael's Church, which I didn't cover, which is 6669-73 Germantown Avenue. So we subdivided that one, and we've done a couple others over the years. Takes, you pay a significant amount to civil engineer. Yeah, there's the property. That's about a 2-acre property. It's the only cemetery I own, which is kind of cool. I really want to find someone who is interested in doing a really cool Halloween party in the cemetery. So if any of you are interested, let me know. This property on the right there, that parsonage building, I sold to another developer, Chris Murray, who's putting apartments in there. All the way to the right is a schoolhouse, which there's a cafe in there currently. He's actually leaving at the end of September, and we're going to find another cafe to take their place. And in the rear, Angie, if you go to the left, is the church and the social hall. The church we have not yet found a tenant for, but we are talking to a brew pub right there, that church. We are talking to a brew pub, and the social hall we renovated into Mount Airy Pediatrics. It's a really gorgeous facility now, and there's a parking lot back there for about 20 cars. So yeah, we also subdivided that one. I realize I didn't answer your question, but it takes about a year and a half to go through all the approvals. You have to go through OPA. But like I said, a civil engineer has to stake it out, has to survey it, has to apply for the subdivision, has to go through the 9th survey district. So a lot of approvals are needed, not controversial. Doesn't need community support, although it's always a good idea to let the community know what you're doing. But if you find a sizable property, it is a good way to divide it, allow for a lot of different uses, and potentially sell off parcels, which is always a good idea.
Great.
So
We had an attendee who mentioned that this was also the location for Mayor of Easttown.
exactly. That's funny because right after we purchased the property, we get a call from HBO that they have something they would like to film there, and do we have any locations for that? And most of our stuff is either under construction or is fully occupied, and they needed something where they could just camp out for a couple months and film. So we thought of this location, and we actually had to pay Mount Airy Pediatrics to delay the start of their lease so that HBO could go in there and film the mayor of Easttown. And what's the woman's name who was I was blank on the actress?
Yeah, Kate Winslet.
Kate Winslet. Kate Winslet. Thank you. So as part of my agreement with HBO, I said that I needed passes for 4 people to be on site during the filming and to meet Kate Winslet, and we actually put that in writing in our agreement. I owed a favor to Ryan Spack, who's another Jumpstart Germantown mentor. And so Ryan and his wife and my wife and I went, and high hopes of meeting and greeting with Kate Winslet. It turns out she was in a really bad mood that day and was not up to meeting anybody. And we had no idea what they were filming. And for those of you who have seen the show, which is really worth seeing, not only because it has a lot of Philly scenes in there, but there's just also a really good show. She plays a very angry type person. So it was almost like she was in character and couldn't talk to us that day. But it was fun to just be on site and see them filming in both the social hall and in the church and in Chris Murray's building, the parsonage in the front. But yeah, if you see a church while you're watching that, that's exactly where it was filmed. So yeah, thanks for that add-on. See, there's always more stories, Angie. Love it, love it. Okay, moving right along. Where are we? I'm going to skip over a few of these. 6379 was one of the first properties we bought on that block. 6139 Germantown Avenue, which is the lofts at Kendrick Mills. It's about a 23,000 square foot commercial building. It was the former, like I said, Kendrick Mills. And we made it into 21 commercial spaces. This was one where a bank, instead of taking over ownership of the property, they wanted to avoid foreclosure because it makes banks look bad when they own properties because it looks bad on their balance sheet. So they had a borrower that was going belly up and wasn't able to make his payments anymore. So instead of foreclosing, they called us and said, hey, would you take over ownership? And I said, sure, would you give me a loan? They said, we are so done with this property, we won't give you a loan because we want to just be done with it, but we will arrange a loan for you at Meridian Bank. So that's exactly what they did. The president of the bank called president of Meridian Bank, arranged for a loan, and we spent about $350,000 bringing it up to code. It was in very rough shape, and it was, at that time, it was about 50% occupied, and now it's 100% occupied. So a very cool building right across the street from Germantown Settlement Music School. Couple properties that I don't own that are always worth talking about. Germantown High School. We almost owned it. The school district put it out for bid. There was 2 bidders, us and Concordia Group. I think we actually bid higher, if I remember, than Concordia Group for both Germantown High School and the elementary school across the street from it. But they awarded it to Concordia Group because for whatever reason, the school district decided that they wanted to only deal with one buying entity. And Concordia was interested in 4 other schools. So they sold Concordia all 6 schools rather than sell these 2 schools to us. Concordia held on to it for a year or 2, flipped them to another developer who is currently making plans to renovate. I believe they have started renovations. And this was an interesting change because the new owner of the property, I should say Germantown United CDC tried to get the property historically designated. And the new owner of the property did not fight that historic designation because City Council had just passed a bill that said that historic properties could use CMX3 uses, which is a lot of uses. So very flexible zoning designation. And so instead of having to go through zoning and get a variance and negotiate with the neighbors, they were able by right to do apartments, to do a charter school, to do a bunch of other uses. And that's what their plan now is, to use that legislation to do those uses. 5826-38 Germantown Avenue. These are a whole bunch of properties. We purchased them at sheriff's sale. We purchased them through Brother Al at Indwelling. And I believe we purchased a couple of them directly from the city. And the reason we purchased all these properties was because we wanted to eventually go after the YWCA, which was next door. It's about 80,000 square foot vacant building. And we knew if we went after it, we would need parking and, a tie-in from these properties. So over time, we purchased each of these properties and accumulated everything from the YWCA to Rittenhouse Street. Best laid plans don't always work. As many of you know, we bid on the YWCA. Our bid both times was blocked by the councilwoman, who then asked the city to award it to KBK, developers out of Ohio. KBK, unfortunately, after 7 years, has not been able to make progress on the property. The redevelopment authority has now taken the property. Well, the properties never went to KBK, but has ended their contract with KBK, and hopefully this will be put out to bid again. And no doubt that we will go after it again and try to put it together with the vacant lots that are next door. So if that doesn't happen, we'll go ahead and just build on those vacant lots at 5826-38. But if we can put it together, it would make both developments stronger. And that's really our goal. We partnered with Center in the Park and Mission First on our proposal, so we weren't doing it alone. We had a lot of expertise. And it is what it is. So we'll see. We, as you can tell by descriptions of a lot of these properties, we pursue them for many years, and sometimes they come around and sometimes they don't. But it's worth pursuing these properties to try to make Germantown a stronger community.
Before you move on, there was a question about whether you had ever given thought to redeveloping the Germantown City Hall across from the high school.
Yeah, good question. I've toured through Germantown Town Hall several times. I don't normally say this, but it is, without major subsidy, it is beyond redevelopment. Meaning probably needs $5, $7, $10 million in order to make the numbers work on this property. It's only 26,000 square feet of usable space, which sounds like a lot, but if you're going to spend $10+ million renovating it, because it's not only historically designated and in rough condition, it also has special designation from the federal government on the tower part. And that designation says that the tower part has to always be open to the general public, which is very difficult. So you can't rent that part of the building. So we have looked at it. I know other people have looked at it. Maybe someone else can figure out how to make it work, but I don't see the future. And hopefully I'm wrong. But thanks for that question. 5233 Germantown Avenue, moving down below GFS at this point, Germantown Friends School. Yet another property that we overpaid. There were Russian owners on this property and they were charging a lot of money. And we knew we wanted to pursue the 6-story storage building at 5301 across the street. And that building is landlocked. There's no land around it. So we knew, if we were going to eventually buy and rehab a 42,000 square foot building across the street, we needed parking and significant amount of parking. So we paid what looked like a lot of money at the time. I think it was $300,000 to buy 5233 and turn it into parking as an accessory use to the building across the street. 5301 was yet another one of these buildings that took about 7 years to acquire. The owner was someone I was in touch with probably twice a year. I knew his life partner and, also stayed in touch with her. And eventually he came around and after 7 years agreed to sell us the building if we leased back the first floor to him. He had a secondhand furniture, mostly furniture shop in there. There was so much storage in that building that we put a forklift into the freight elevator and spent months and months just removing all of the unclaimed storage stuff from that building. A quick sort of bringing it to date. I went into some of those storage units with my kids and we pulled out a few interesting things that we didn't want to see thrown away. One of them, it's hard to describe, but it was a giant book that had something to do with Israel and Israeli leaders from the past going back to 1948. And it just looks interesting. So I brought it home with me, brought it to my house where it was sitting in my office. And when we recently went to move to a new house, I put it on the street with a lot of other stuff that we wanted to get rid of and to let people take it. And a lot of people took stuff. One of a new mentor in the Jumpstart Germantown program, Jake Fisher, who lives up the street, and his wife stopped by and took it. And the only reason I knew they took it is we ran into them on the street about a month ago and they said, "Hey, we took that giant book from you." And I said, "Well, was it interesting?" She said, "Not only was it interesting, we looked up each of the pages, and one of the pages was personally signed by Shimon Peres, who was a former president of Israel. And she actually took that page, framed it, and gave it to her parents, who are big fans of Shimon Peres." So anyway, just a story within a story. We also found one storage locker in the building that had a lot of family photos. Based on what was in the photos, we were able to Google and find the family, gave them notice, and they came and picked up all their stuff. So we very much didn't want to see the family photos get thrown away. So Angie, I know it's 8 o'clock. I know we could keep going, but I'm happy to answer questions. And, if people are interested enough, we can cover Wayne Junction another day, which starts at 4811 Germantown Avenue.
Yeah, I have to say, this hour really flew by. I'm glad you were looking at the clock. This is really fascinating. We do have a couple questions. There was one that going back to the Presbyterian Church, 7111, asking if it was originally planned as co-housing and then switched to a condo model.
Yeah, you probably heard something about it at the time. That was our first thought for the building, was that, and we had active negotiations with a co-housing group, which would have been a very cool idea. So we met with them several times. We got a sense of what they wanted to see in the building. We then designed to their specifications. And then unfortunately we got to pricing, and they just weren't, unfortunately, realistic. One of their goals, which is understandable and very noble, is they wanted to not just have a racially diverse group of people as part of their co-housing project, but also economically diverse. Well, economically diverse means that you have to have a wide range of pricing. Well, you know, we were restoring this historic building to historic specifications laid out by the Historic Commission, and it just wasn't possible to have you know, low moderate income housing in the project. So when we eventually gave them the range that we would need to charge per unit, they said, well, that's not going to work because we're not going to be able to be economically diverse. Fast forward, once we changed the project to a condo model, at least a couple of the original members of that co-housing group did buy. And we actually have some community gathering spaces in the building so that people can congregate, which is part of what they wanted.
Great.
So very cool idea. Hopefully co-housing can happen elsewhere in Northwest Philly.
And then another question on that same property, is the theater the only tenant in the church building, or is there other tenants that will be in that church space?
So like I said, we built the 19 condos, 12 are sold. We still have 7 for sale, if anyone's interested. They're very cool spaces. My partner, Scott Seibert, who, by the way, I met when I did the Waldorf School deal because he was on the board of Waldorf. And we eventually became friends and business partners, and he did a really nice renovation of the property. The sanctuary of the church, which is about 4,000 square feet, and the space below the sanctuary, which is another 4,000, like I said, we signed a long-term lease with Lantern Theater, who also has office space catty corner to there above the Cherish restaurant. So it's just the condo units and Lantern Theater, and that's the whole 35,000 square feet of the building.
Okay. And then we had a question, a more general question. Which one was your most memorable project and why?
Yeah, that's always hard to say because they're all memorable, as you can tell from these stories. But maybe Waldorf School. That was a really challenging project. We bought a 1.5 acre campus from the Episcopal Diocese. This is at the corner of Wayne. It's 6008 Wayne Avenue, Angie, if you wanted to put it up. This is at the corner of Wayne and Harvey in Upper Germantown. And we bought the property for $430,000 from the Episcopal Diocese, which doesn't sound like a lot of money because it's not. It had 4 historic properties, 4 historic buildings on the campus. A little hard to see the buildings here, but they're really nice. And we did it was Frank Furness design from late 1800s, and we were able to save all 4 of these buildings. 2 of the buildings in particular were so far out of whack, the church, the sanctuary, and also the building across from the church, that they probably would have collapsed within 2 to 3 years if we had not saved them. The exterior walls were at an angle, which is the first step towards collapse. So we were able to spend $6.5 million saving these buildings. We essentially did a partnership with the Waldorf School so that their rent depended on the cost of the renovations, which is kind of a unique way of doing it. Sometimes you got to get very conservative. But as I like to say, the kids who attend this school, about 250 kids, are some of the luckiest kids ever because they just have this wonderful facility to go to school in every day. It's very unique, beautiful campus, a lot of green space, which is part of the Waldorf philosophy. So it was a very difficult project to pull together. And yeah, it may have been one of my favorites.
Yeah, it is amazing, amazing space. They used to, hopefully they'll bring it back. They used to have a holiday event there where it was like a craft festival, and yeah, just amazing. I feel like a lot of folks refer to it as the Hogwarts as well. So
yes,
some of the spaces kind of are reminiscent of Hogwarts. So it's
Angie, there's one building in the back that everybody says that about.
Yeah,
just has that feel to it.
Yeah, it is very neat. So I think that was it. We have a lot of folks saying they're very interested in hearing more. They'd love to hear Wayne Junction. The storytelling really brings this to life. So I think a second set is definitely in the near future. I think that would be great to get that scheduled. We did have a question that's not related to this about our PHA properties and where those are. And I do have an exciting announcement that with round one, which was our 10 properties, the very first one, we have 5 of those that have already sold to low-income individuals. We have 2 others under contract, 2 that are currently marketing, and 1 that is finishing up. They're 96% done. So that's where we are with our round 1. Round 2 and round 3, PHA hit a little bit of a hiccup, and they're working with HUD. So we look forward to closing on those properties soon and having those folks start renovations. So just wanted to make sure I got that person's question answered. But I think that's it. Let me just pull up our next upcoming webinar.
Angie,
Yeah.
wouldn't it be great if we were able to do this in person instead of over Zoom? You think that's possible?
I think it is. I think we're getting there.
maybe we can gather in Wayne Junction to talk about Wayne Junction. That would be pretty cool.
That would be great. That would be excellent. So coming up, we've got some great programs coming up for you, and Derek will be back for these. He is starting with us full time. He's the face that you normally see on these JUMPinars, and we're very excited that he's going to become a full-time member of Jumpstart community. So these will be coming up: construction contingency, developing with the community in mind, multi-unit conversions, and I've bought my first property. Now what? So definitely register for these, and we'll have more coming up soon as well. And I like the idea of in-person tour. I think the only issue is that we might have, if we have 43 people here. Can you do 43 people tour? Do we need headsets?
Yeah, if we had headsets, we could. But I was actually thinking about just gathering in Wayne Junction rather than touring. I mean, I would love to tour, don't get me wrong. And I've done tours of up to about 20 people in Wayne Junction. But yeah, more than that would be difficult.
Yeah. No, we should definitely have another networking event there. Hopefully some of the folks on this call were at our last networking event at Attic Brewery in mid-June. I think we'll have another one probably when Derek gets back in mid to late August. We'll get folks out there again, and you'll get to see Wayne Junction and be in Wayne Junction. And then we'll bring Ken back for another JUMPinar to do another virtual tour of the rest of Germantown Ave and Wayne Junction. So that'll be great.
Cool. I look forward to it.
All right. Well, thank you all so much, and we'll see you in a few weeks at the next JUMPinar. And thanks, Ken. This was fun.
Take care.
All right. Good night.